SJC-11754, Commonwealth versus Dagrace-Teixeira.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. My name is...
One second. Okay, now you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Travis Jacobs. I represent co-defendant Jason Dagrace-Teixeira. I'm accompanied by my brother Jake Stone, who represents co-defendant Adelson Teixeira. I will be addressing the sufficiency of the evidence with respect to the contraband found in the bedrooms, and he will be addressing the sufficiency of the evidence with respect to the attic hatch. There are really four separate analyses that must take place in this case to determine the sufficiency of the evidence. The first is with respect to with Adelson with respect to bedroom number 2. The second is with respect to Jason in bedroom number 1, and then each of them with respect to the contraband found in the attic hatch. There are these different analyses that must take place because at the very outset, Adelson was present at the time this search took place, while Jason was not. The case law on sufficiency of the evidence, as I'm sure you all know, is all over the map. These are very fact-intensive cases, and it requires a very close analysis of each and every fact. In this particular case, there were a couple of items that seemed to tip the scale for the appellate court. With respect to Jason, that had to do with the baptism certificate and a key that was allegedly found on his person. That key was tried on the door lock to bedroom number 1 and was found to lock and unlock the door. And then with respect to Adelson, he was present in the apartment when the police arrived to execute the search warrant, and there was a birth certificate with his name on it found in bedroom number 2. With regard to Jason, he arrived after the police had begun their execution of the search warrant. Police had already searched, they'd already entered the room. There's no evidence they had to breach the door to bedroom number 1, which was alleged to be Jason's. And so it appears to have been unlocked. Although there was a key found on his person, we would submit that that's not sufficient to demonstrate any intent to exercise dominion and control over any items in that room, given that it was unlocked. But aside from that, starting with the knowledge or ability to exercise, knowledge of any contraband in the room. With both Jason and Adelson, there are no photos of these rooms. There's no evidence that there are any pictures taken of inside the rooms. There's no evidence other than the baptism certificate and the birth certificate and the key. There's no evidence that either of these gentlemen even lived in these rooms. There's no CDs with their initials on them, no MP3 players with their initials, no school records, no employment records. I mean, literally not a scintilla of anything to link these two kids to these 2 bedrooms.
But what about you go past the birth certificates and the baptismal certificates? I mean, that's not nothing.
Well,
I mean, it's not like even just a stray bill or anything. That's a fairly specific kind of document.
I think it's interesting that they are a birth certificate and a baptism certificate. You have 2 approximately 19, 20-year-old kids, and the only thing linking them to their bedrooms are a baptism certificate and a birth certificate. The baptism certificate was dated August 2004, and there was the name Jason lowercase d-a, and then capital G-R-A-C-E was on the baptism certificate. That's not Mr. Dagrace's name, even.
Well, what about the birth certificate? Was that...
The birth certificate did have Mr. Adelson Teixeira's name on it, but at the same time, it's the only item found in this room that had his name on it, or anything. No school record, no employment record. There was no evidence that Adelson lived there, or that Jason lived in that, even in that apartment.
Was there evidence as to who rented the apartment?
No. No evidence as to who rented the apartment. No evidence as to when the last time either of them were there. The night that the police executed the search warrant, there was a party going on. There were 8 to 10 people in the apartment. The bathroom was beyond the bedrooms and beyond the hatch, so anyone at the party could have walked to it.
I'm actually confused. Your client is Jason, right?
Correct.
He had a key to one of the bedrooms,
Correct.
and that's where heroin was found.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, and he's got and his baptismal certificate, his cell phone were in that room,
Correct.
and that's not enough?
But the cell phone and anything else was not admitted evidence. It was just simply mentioned by the officer. And Justice Cordy, I actually would turn your attention to a case that you decided with Justice Spina several years ago, Commonwealth v. Borea. In that case, somewhat similar to what we have here, there was a female defendant. As police entered to execute a search warrant, she's sitting in the living room watching TV. The police find drugs in the VCR underneath the TV she's watching. And in a closet in the living room, they find an address book with her name on it and an application she had filled out for some government benefit. In that case, there was no sufficiency of the evidence to link her, or the evidence was found insufficient to link her to the drugs found in that apartment. When clearly she's in the room.
But the bedroom is, I mean, the living room is a common area. The bedroom is not.
But she also was found to be a resident of that apartment. These 2 gentlemen were never found to be actual residents of this apartment.
But he's got a key to the bedroom?
There's no evidence this is the last time he used that, lived there. No evidence this is the last time he was there. In researching this case, I realized I have keys from apartments I've lived in, years ago. So
Yeah, but on your person?
No, well, not on my own personal keychain, but
Weren't they on his person? Wasn't it on his person?
it was. But we have no evidence to know if it was on a keychain. Was it stuck in a pocket? Was it in a jacket pocket? We have no information or evidence at all. The glaring thing in this case is the absence of any background information. No lease information, no evidence or testimony as to when the last time these 2 kids were even seen at this place. Did they just show up for the party? Did they live at this place previously? Did their parents live there and they were coming home for a visit? All those things are relevant, and without those pieces of evidence, we have really a glaring absence of evidence. This evidence was simply insufficient.
All right, I think your time is up.
Sorry,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr.
I'll
Stone,
rest on my brief.
Mr. Stone is just racing to, eager to make his argument concerning the attic, so
Sorry about that.
we'll still give you the same 5 minutes, Mr. Stone.
Thank you very much. Jacob Stone, Your Honor, for Dagrace-Teixeira. In terms of the attic, Your Honor, the Commonwealth, even assuming that Jason and Adelson did live in those bedrooms, the Commonwealth did not demonstrate any kind of particular relationship that they had with the attic, apart from it being next to the bedroom doors. There was nothing else said about the attic that would have given an indication as to how recently it had been accessed. There was no information.
Okay, what was the evidence? You go down a hall and the attic, you push something open and then have to get pushed into it?
Yeah, I believe it was just kind of a standard attic hatch where there's a piece of wood that the police had to push up and then they had to give somebody a boost.
In the ceiling?
Yeah, it was up in the ceiling.
And is it over a common hall, in the interior hall? Is that
Right. Like if I believe my memory of the apartment was correct, the 3 bedrooms were all kind of located off of this common hallway, and that attic hatch was in that hallway.
Okay.
So you literally have to have somebody cup their hands and then step on it and then lift themselves into the attic?
Right, or find a ladder, something to give yourself a boost up
That's
there.
what the police did. They got.
Right. They gave one of the officers a boost, and he sat up in there. He actually sat on the guns that were discovered first. In its opinion, the appeals court relied on a couple of cases, Montanez and Gonzalez, to talk about how basically if you have a link of somebody to a room, then their dominion isn't necessarily ended by the 4 walls. But I think the problem with relying on those 2 cases is in both of them, drugs were found outside of an apartment. One was found in a ceiling of a hallway of the apartment building. The other was found outside the window. But in both of those, there was evidence of significant evidence of drug dealing, drug transactions that had been going on inside the apartment. So there was a logical connection between drugs found just outside the apartment and the evidence of drug dealing and drug transactions that had taken place inside the apartment.
Wasn't there, Montanez, there was also significant evidence that the defendant was very much connected to the apartment.
Right.
Quite apart from the hall, but.
There had been observations of him engaging in the drug trade involving that apartment. So there was a connection. There was that logical link. In this case, there was no connection between finding a couple of small bags of heroin in these rooms and a firearm.
What does the record show with respect to the condition of the firearms? Were they rusty? Were they, well maintained? Any?
I don't believe there was any. I don't think there was anything noted about poor condition. I think they just were found there, and the police just seized them. I don't think there was any specific information about their condition or fireability that was entered. But going back to what I was just saying, though, I guess the problem is, trying to link, possession of drugs in a bedroom to a firearm nearby. I mean, there's no connection between those. And, the court itself, in its opinion, said, there was a link of criminal activity. I think that's too broad. I think if any criminal activity in one part of an apartment could be linked to somebody living there in terms of constructive possession. I mean, if instead in these bedrooms, instead of possession of drugs, if it was some other crime, I don't think there would be, again, any particular link to show that they had the knowledge, ability, and intent to control a firearm that was discovered in the apartment. I think Montanez and Gonzalez just don't take it that far. And I think really that kind of sums it up as far as our position. If there's no further questions, we'll leave it to the briefs.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chief Justice, members of the panel, I am Yulmi Cho for the Commonwealth. I will start with the firearms. The defendants had constructive possession of the firearms found in an inaccessible attic hatch, which was found inside of an apartment that the defendant dwelled in.
How many people lived in the apartment?
We do not know, other than to say that when the search warrant was executed, there were 8 to 10 people, including Adelson, and while the search was ongoing, Jason arrived shortly thereafter with a girlfriend.
But when you say dwelt in the apartment, you're going on the fact that in the bedroom was the baptismal certificate and the birth certificate. Is that? I mean, there's nothing else. You don't know to whom it was rented. You don't have observations that they're coming and going, do you?
We do not have those facts, but I think we have a little more than just the documents. We know that the apartment was set up and furnished in such a way that it was a dwelling as opposed to just an empty, sparsely furnished apartment where just drug operation was going on. There was, people living there.
Was there a ladder found anywhere in the apartment?
No, Your Honor. So going back to the hatch, it wasn't a low ceiling where you could just reach in and get to the hatch. But
so
rather
I'm just wondering if there wasn't a ladder anywhere.
Within the apartment?
Yes.
I don't think there was any testimony as to that, other than the police officer who retrieved the firearms had to be thrown up. So I think one of the justices had said, you probably had to be lifted up that way. So in addition to the apartment being set up as if people were living there, you also have the bedrooms also set up as if people were, they occupied the bedrooms. It wasn't just some sparsely furnished apartment, but rather there was.
I'm sorry. Was there evidence as to beds and beds being made and closets with clothes in them, or anything that indicated somebody was dwelling in those 2 bedrooms?
Yes, Your Honor. So I think the testimony regarding what is alleged to be Adelson's bedroom was there's more description to that. So there was a bed in there, a couch, a table, a television on the table, a flat screen television, and a stack of papers next to which was the birth certificate bearing Adelson's name.
What were the
And,
papers?
they don't say other than to say that it was a stack of papers.
Any clothes?
No testimony one way or other. So there could have been clothes, there could have been CDs, there could have been a number of different personal items, but this was a rather rushed. You can get the sense from the transcript that it wasn't a very, intensive trial, but rather a rushed type of district court, trial. So, so based on the fact that this was an apartment where a number of people lived, and the fact that the firearms were not easily accessible, I think you can limit the persons who could have put the firearms there to the people who lived there. And I think the defendants having connections to these bedrooms likely played this.
There's a third bedroom that we know nothing about, though, correct?
That is true. So that is true. So it's entirely possible that whoever occupied the third bedroom also had access or joint control over the firearms, but I don't think that eviscerates the connections that the evidence establishes between the defendants and the firearms. And I would also add that the hallway that's off the kitchen where the bedrooms are connected to, it was a rather short hallway. So the bedrooms, the two doors are immediately underneath the hatch. Thus, I think there's that close connection there, as opposed to the attic being, in the middle of a living room or something like that. So it was more closely controlled, I think. The inference can be drawn from that. Also found on the defendants were a substantial amount of cash. On Adelson was $340, and on Jason was $375. So I think that goes towards the defendants having, control over the heroin in the bedrooms as a part of their drug operation. Although, admittedly, they were convicted of simple possession as opposed to possession with intent to distribute.
But you're not connecting the money to the guns, are you?
No, but I think you could make an inference that a person who's connected with a drug operation would also have a gun as opposed to just a simple guest at a house party. Oh, I would also add that the defendants were present in the apartment at 11 o'clock at night when the search warrant was executed. So I think their presence also definitely adds to this group of evidence that we have towards their residential status at the apartment.
But the gun was not, if you're worried about drug ripoffs, by the time it's awful hard to get to. So it's not really that useful, given its location, to prevent somebody from ripping them off.
Right. So that is one possibility, but I think perhaps, I think the evidence was that the people in the apartment at that time were, people sharing the same last name. I think the father was there, another person, Dagrace-Teixeira was there, a woman and children and other teenager children. So maybe at that time it was, they were having like a get together among close friends and family, thus they wanted to put the gun away. But I think you could infer someone wanting to have control and exclusion of others, control over the gun by putting the gun in an inaccessible place, yet have it be close and under control where you live and where you keep your other personal belongings in the bedrooms.
Was there evidence as to how many beds there were in the apartment total?
No, Your Honor. I think the only evidence of beds being there, other than inferentially that there was bedrooms, is just Adelson's bedroom had a bed in it, definitely. But I don't think there was testimony regarding that in the other bedrooms.
And I take it there was nothing else found in the attic besides the guns, and the guns were inside a plastic shopping bag wedged in between a couple of the joists. Yes.
There was no testimony one way or other whether there were other items in the attic, but I think the officer who discovered it, I think, said it was in between the joists and the insulation, but it was exposed. So as soon as you got up there, if he hadn't been sitting on it, he would have seen it right away. So, if you made the effort of, getting up there, then it would have been very accessible, but the space itself is inaccessible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Okay.